Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into a really big question, one I think resonates with a lot of people. This feeling of being overwhelmed by information, maybe struggling with focus or anxiety or just like things don't quite make sense anymore. Well, what if
Mm-mm.
that's not just biological? What if it's deeper, tied somehow to how we actually, process information?
Right.
We're going to explore a pretty radical idea today.
Yeah, our source material for this is excerpts from Odom Tilley, Healing the Mind from Linguistic Deception. It's by Dr. Mummerjan Kuchkarov.
He's the author of the Odom-Tilley theory.
Exactly. And this material comes from the official OTA channel. So this deep dive is really about trying to grasp this whole new way of thinking about our minds.
And it kicks off with a really striking idea. The source frames what's happening globally not just as biological issues, but as cognitive pandemics.
Cognitive pandemics.
Okay.
Okay, what does that mean exactly? Well, it points to symptoms we all recognize, right? Things like attention disorders, ADHD, widespread anxiety, chronic apathy, even a loss of meaning, mass demotivation.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds familiar.
And in more severe cases, it talks about dementia, psychoses.
Mm.
But the core question the text raises is, why haven't fields like medicine, neuroscience, psychology, even philosophy, why haven't they really tackled the root cause? What it sees as humanity losing the basic ability to think, to distinguish reality.
That's a huge claim that what we call mental illness might be something else entirely. Okay, let's unpack that. If it's not biological in the usual sense,
Yeah.
and the standard approaches are missing something, what is the issue according to this source?
Well, the argument is that basically all our current ways of thinking,
Yeah.
religion, science, the whole lot, are built on foundations that are, well, abstract.
Right.
They're assumptions that aren't really empirically verified.
Like what kind of assumptions?
Okay, so science might say consciousness is a product of the brain.
Right. Right. Standard idea.
Religion might say consciousness is a gift from above, the soul.
Okay.
Psychology often defines it as, a set of mental processes.
Mm-hmm.
But the critique here is sharp. It says none of these models actually explain how we tell truth from lies, or how a thought becomes speech, or how sound even gets meaning.
Mm.
Instead, the text argues they rely on metaphysics disguised as logic.
Mm.
And the result, cognitive dissonance on a planetary level.
Mm.
It's like our mental operating system is flawed.
Wow. Okay. Cognitive dissonance on a planetary level. That's
Yeah.
quite a statement. So if our whole foundation for understanding reality is maybe shaky, what does that mean for us? Like in our everyday lives, how does this dissonance show up?
Yeah, this is where it gets really practical, kind of. It means we're living in a paradox, according to this view. Conditions we label like depression or autism, dementia, panic attacks.
Yeah.
The source says these often are diseases in the traditional sense.
Okay. So what are they then?
They're described as an informational reaction of the brain to irreconcilable signals.
An informational reaction.
Yeah, the analogy they use is pretty potent. Like when the language we use clashes with reality or reality clashes with how we describe it, the brain just gets overloaded.
Like a computer crashing.
Exactly, like a computer infected with a virus. It slows down, maybe disables certain functions, or it just blocks out the irritants, the conflicting signals, which really makes you think, what if these symptoms aren't weaknesses? What if they're actually the brain trying to protect itself?
Protect itself from what? From the faulty information.
From the semantic falsehood, as the text puts it. So psychosis, for instance, gets reframed, not as a breakdown, but as a break from false reality.
Wow.
And that apathy, that lack of motivation, it's seen not as weakness, but as an instinct of self-preservation. Like the brain just saying, hold on, this doesn't add up, I'm opting out.
Okay, so if our current thinking, our current language systems are the problem, this is where Odom Tilley steps in as the solution.
Exactly.
And Odom Tilley, you said it means language of man in Uzbek, but it's not about the Uzbek language specifically.
No, not at all. It's presented as a much broader empirical theory about the very origin of language itself, not as culture, but as a biological function.
Biological. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are the core ideas of this theory then? How does it see language differently?
Right. So the core principles are, well, they're pretty foundational. First, it claims that every single sound, every phoneme, has a direct physical link to our bodily experience. Sensory, perceptual.
Every sound, like T or I.
Yes, every single one. Second, language isn't just a social agreement like we all decided cat means cat. It's seen as a neurophysiological response to the world.
A response.
And third, words didn't start because people agreed on them. They originated from our body's direct reactions to reality, physical reactions.
Can you give an example? How does that work with sounds?
Sure. The material gives examples of what it calls phonetic semantics. So sound I, like it relates to a compressed exhale and an internal effort, like holding back pain maybe. Sound I, think about making it. A round mouth. It's often a signal of surprise or maybe fear.
Okay, I can see that.
On the sound T, it's linked directly to touch, to impact, contact. You feel it.
Right.
So the theory basically says language should be this semantic code of direct, felt experience. Every word, every sound tied to something real, something observable, something bodily.
And if it's not, if we lose that connection...
Then, according to Odom Tilley, that's when we lose rationality, emotional stability, our sense of meaning, because the code is broken.
Okay, so this is implying our modern languages, the ones we speak every day, are somehow broken or, as you said earlier, infected.
That's exactly the argument. The source describes modern languages as infected systems, distorted by things like, well, political PR, religious dogma, and academic snobbery is the phrase used.
Strong words.
Very. And it gives examples of words it claims lack this real bodily empirical root. Words like spirituality, values, freedom, duty, development.
Those are pretty fundamental concepts for us.
They are. But the argument is that these words aren't just abstract. They're often packed with manipulation, with hidden agendas, ideological baggage, distorted meanings.
Okay.
And so when our brains are swimming in this linguistic fog all the time, the theory suggests they naturally start to, malfunction or break down.
So the issue isn't just bad information, it's the very tools we use to process information or words that might be the problem.
Precisely. And this leads to the point that maybe our definition of normal society is actually contributing to the problem.
Right. So if the problem is this linguistic infection, what's the fix, according to Odom Tilley? Doesn't sound like popping a pill or standard therapy.
No, not at all. It proposes something quite different.
Yeah.
A neurolinguistic reinstallation of language.
A reinstallation, like software.
Kind of, yeah.
Eh.
But based on biology. It uses that phonetic semantics idea, the real meaning in sounds and the empirical biology of how we make sounds, calibrating meaning back to direct bodily sensation.
Okay, and what does that achieve? What's the goal?
The claim is it allows you to start distinguishing these manipulative constructs from, real meaning to restore cognitive clarity and to activate what the source calls white radio.
White radio.
Yeah, basically like a clear channel.
Yeah.
Connecting you back to your own logic, your own direct experience of the world, unfiltered by these distortions.
So it's about reclaiming clear thinking.
Exactly. And the source is very clear. This is not philosophy. It says this is a new type of cognitive engineering, not faith, not ideology, but a technology of thinking capable of restoring consciousness.
The technology of thinking. Wow. So this whole deep dive, it's offering a really audacious shift in how we might look at things. Instead of just managing symptoms of anxiety or depression or lack of focus, Odom Tilley is saying, hang on, let's look at the absolute foundation. Let's look at language itself.
Yeah. And connecting that back to the bigger picture, the source leaves us with a really powerful thought. It asks basically, today, it's no longer important what to do with mental disorders. What's more important is, why do we call normal that which causes these disorders?
Ooh, that hits hard.
It does. It elaborates.
Honestly.
If we live in a society where maybe 80% of people are dealing with anxiety or apathy, and we call that society healthy, then the source suggests maybe madness is the last honest form of resistance.
Wow.
And Odom Tilley is presented as the alternative, a way back to what it calls the ontological honesty of language. Language that's truthful to our physical, biological reality, uncorrupted.
So really, listening to this, you might walk away with more questions than answers about how you perceive the world, about the words you use, the words you hear.
That's kind of the point, isn't it?
Yeah, to really consider.
Yeah.
How might the language filling our heads every day be shaping not just our thoughts, but our feelings, our very sense of reality?
And the final assertion from the source is pretty bold, but also hopeful in a way. It says, consciousness isn't just some abstract idea, it's a biological algorithm, like a program that's been damaged by lies embedded in our language. But crucially, it says it can be restored.
It can be restored. That's the key takeaway. Well, if you're as intrigued by all this as we are, the source material points towards the Odom Tilley Akademiasi, and Dr. Momojin Kuchkarov's YouTube channel for more information.
Yeah, you can find that on YouTube under @Mabuchu Kuchkarov 3469.
Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.